Hey guys, and welcome to the Strategy Podcast. I'm your host RSC, and today I have a very special guest with me, Mons Abraham. Mons is an amazing personality. He has worked with entrepreneurs and leaders from some of the top Ivy League universities. He has an incredible profile. He's a mentor in charge at Artificial Tinkering Labs and has a tremendous journey. He's a marketing, branding, and strategy expert. So today we're going to speak to him on a lot of topics that startups, especially early stage companies, deal with. So I'm super excited to have him on the show. And Mons, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Super happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me over here.
So tell me about how what has been your association with the startup ecosystem and when did it all began?
As you see from my profile, most of the things which are there, none of it came to be by design. I mean, I never planned when I started that this is how the journey is going to roll out, and these are the things so and so which are going to fall in place. And just grateful, it's just about you hear them say that you just take the first step and the rest of the journey just kind of just falls into place.
I come from a startup management consulting background, and when I started my company, I almost always used to think that I'm going to do it better than him. But over the course of this journey, I have realized that it's tough. You have to be a tough nut to handle the challenges, the emotional feelings that come along with it. So I just want to talk to you about the challenges that an early stage founder faces, especially if he is not coming from an brand situation. It is very difficult for him to either convince a customer because he does not have a pedigree or an investor to trust him and back him up. So with these challenges, how do you think an early stage founder can deal with these challenges and can move ahead in his journey?
So I'll be extremely honest. If you were to talk about any of the, institutions or any of the other things, those are only the initial signaling things which are there. So if someone is supposedly say from an IIT or IIM or Harvard or Stanford, those are just the initial signaling things which you see that okay, that probably this person has the gift in terms of just making it to that university. So it tells you a little bit about the person in terms of they probably did well in terms of rigor, in terms of whatever the academics required them to achieve. But in terms of the next things, it's all about the value that you create. So it's never 100%. So if you look at someone like in India, someone like Sri Dhirubhai Ambani, I mean, just see the kind of empire that has been created. Or if you look at someone like Vijay Shekhar Sharma, he's the youngest Indian billionaire, and he had the gift. He just worked hard, and it's all about the value that you create. As long as you can create value for the customer doesn't come in, and any kind of money which comes in. I have always believed that the biggest validation for your company is the money that the customer gives you. So any customer who comes in, he doesn't really ask you, so and so and the backgrounds and stuff. He only cares, what can you do for him or her, and that's the only thing which matters. If you're able to, fulfill on that, then your company is on a better track to just getting to the next level.
So I have a follow-up question on this. You have worked closely with a lot of founders from an Ivy League background. Do you think it makes a difference? Does it create more value or a perception in the minds of both the consumers and the investors that he's going to get a better deal there?
So I'll be just brutally honest, right? So when I was starting off, I was like 25 years old, right? And I realized pretty early on that no one really takes a 25-year-old kid seriously. And I obviously, when I started off, I knew that I had some capabilities, some skills, and something to offer to the customer. But the customer necessarily doesn't understand this. So one of the hacks that I figured out was, if I can create value for entrepreneurs and business leaders from some of these good universities, then I can probably use it as a signaling thing to say that I've worked with these kind of incredible leaders, and that's probably why you can trust me with some of the things that you expect me to achieve. So it was more of a hack in terms of just creating that perception, but I've had incredible experience working with leaders across. I mean, I have incredible friends. I've worked with them. They're dear friends now, and I just have the honor of just knowing them and working with them. But I don't really think about stuff. So as a 25-year-old, it was just a hack for me to just prove myself to the world and be taken more seriously. But otherwise, I mean, like I'm just grateful for all the opportunities and for all the leaders that I get to work with.
It's an interesting point, and I've always seen uh, that having a certain pedigree does allow you to open doors which are difficult otherwise for you to uh, get into. So, but that being said, we have many stories about entrepreneurs who've been able to create a lot of value and justify their place in the ecosystem by doing that. So I guess it's more towards creating value, but having that background certainly helps them out.
It's not the degree which helps them; it's the environment which helps them. Right. So supposedly, if they so I learned about say something like venture capital and private equity only when I was around 23, 24 years of age. Okay. So a normal kid, who would be getting into say probably say an IIT or any of the other spaces, they would come to know about some of these areas and interests way earlier. For us, I mean, like it would be much more difficult when you think about what new things. It's all about the environment per se. So that's one advantage where because whichever space you're in, you will get to learn about more things. So supposedly, if you happen to be in Silicon Valley, you'll get to learn about the fastest advances. Vis-a-vis, I mean, like if you were to be in India, right? That's one advantage. But having said that, we can obviously say that the bridge has been the gap has been bridged to some extent. I mean, like anything which happens anywhere, we can learn about it. But still, living and working, and I mean, like going through that trial and working with world class people. That is something which is the environment part of it. Again, I would not say as long as you're committed to really grow the limits out of yourself in terms of just being the best version that you feel would help you on your journey. It's all about just working towards that, and there obviously the hustle is a bit more harder, but it still can be done. I would not really worry about the degree way too much.
I have two questions now. When we talk about entrepreneurs starting out their journey initially, there are a lot of challenges that they face. I want to talk about one specific challenge, which is about moving from a strategy that is created on a piece of paper to execution on the ground. Uh, Observing the startups, the early stage startups here at this incubator, I feel a lot of them are great on paper. They have these beautiful strategies, but when it comes to implementation on the ground, there are gaps and there will be. So, how can entrepreneurs be more creative when it comes to executing those strategies on the ground and mapping those results? Startup because there are no systems in place. It has to be done at an individual level. So how can somebody with no entrepreneurial background actually go about doing it?
So one of the best hacks is to be just fearless and shameless. So if you're less embarrassed about the first offering that you're putting out in the market, and none of your first products will be like pitch perfect in terms of being 100% out there. So if you look at the earliest offerings, if you I think Airbnb celebrated a couple of years. I think just a day back there was a tweet by I think one of the founders, and they were just sharing the very first layout of Airbnb. And today, as of now, I mean, like it's a totally different thing altogether. So just being a bit fearless, and if you don't really care about the world, and you're just focused on okay, I'll just put out the first product out there, or first offering out there, see how the market responds. Be willing to be a bit thick-skinned about it, saying that it's okay if people say that it doesn't really work, and the product breaks from here and there, and you're sincere enough to fix those things and just keep iterating and making the product better, you should be fine. But be rest assured that even if you feel that you're like totally worked it to perfection and then you launch it, something will be amiss. And in most cases, just not being aware of with the customer in the loop or the consumer in the loop, you might have built something which might not even be really relevant or required in the market. So be frugal, be cheap, just push your product out in the market, get that feedback. Don't worry too much about getting things perfect, and just keep working, and just keep iterating. That would be something which would work for early stage founders, and you don't have to really worry too much about it. Just be a bit thick-skinned. Know that you're in the long run. You don't have to appear 100% perfect, and just you're building a company, and there will be missteps. As long as you don't cheat the customers, as long as you don't hurt people, and you don't create problems for the shareholder, you will be fine.
So I kind of agree with your point there that entrepreneurs have to have thick skin and be ready to fail quickly and faster. But do you feel that most entrepreneurs, young, early stage entrepreneurs, they are not comfortable with the idea of failure? Do you notice that?
So we don't realize this, but most of the things that you're really passionate about, right? We don't really think about it as failing. So supposedly, if you're like trying to uh, pick up the skills to play a guitar, right? Or supposedly you are into adventure sports and you're trying to pick up, probably racing or cycling or whatever it is. We just assume that okay, we haven't reached the stage where things are working for you and you've picked up the skill. So that would be something like a growth mindset, right? You don't feel that okay, I wasn't able to probably ride the cycle the first time, so I'm never going to do it. So you feel that array, yaar, this is something which is not for me. It's not really a very big thing for you. So that's something which you have to cultivate, and it's all about just believing the fact that there's nothing which is inherent. Sometimes it can be, I mean, like if you were to go deep into meditation, you will find that you will believe that you know a lot of things already, and when you get into adverse situations, those things, those characteristics or those whatever you really are inside, they reveal themselves to you. But otherwise, just being in a fixed mindset, it helps. It's true that in an Indian education system, especially, it's always appreciable if you've not really failed and all the other things, but it doesn't really help, because at the end of the day, you just think of it as you're really passionate. I mean, like if you look at even my own practice, when I started off with something as simple as branding and marketing, but if I look at myself, 9 years back and what I knew then, and right now in terms of what I know now, and the discipline and focus to put in the time to become better every day, it wouldn't have come if I had just told myself that okay, this is all I know, this is all I can offer to the world, and you will have to build that mindset. And unfortunately, it's not there. In part, owing to the Indian education system. But as long as we can teach kids that it's effort which bring out grades and not inherent capability, there lies the chance that we will be able to help more people. And in Delhi, it's happening. In Delhi government schools, it's happening. We have something called the happiness curriculum and the entrepreneurship curriculum. So it's helping a few kids there, but it is a problem in India, and it happens at a young stage. So we need to help them.
We talk about the growth mindset, and I'm having a deja vu moment because yesterday, the conversation that I had with Sally, we were talking about the exact same thing. We were talking about people, that there are two kinds of people in the world, one with a static mindset, one with a growth mindset. And usually, she said, people who we like the most in a room is not the one with the highest grades, is the one who brings a differentiative mind to the table. Somebody who is constantly thinking about different problems that he hasn't dealt with before, and he tries to find solutions towards it. So that opens your mind. Being a growth hacker, having that mindset is extremely important for an early stage founder, which brings me to the question of growing your startup. At an early stage, I think you need to kind of have that written determination to really growth hack yourself, put yourself in a position, because most of them are short of budget. They really don't have too much money to spend. So, and if you can tell us something about growth hacking your startup at an early stage with minimal budgets, how do we go about that entire journey?
Working on your startup, there are two components to it, right? One is obviously the product or the offering, and then the marketing part of it. Whenever you're trying to growth hack, it pays to, have pay equal attention to both parts of it. You could be the best innovator in the world, but if you don't really take care of the marketing part of it, your product might not really reach the 10, 100,000 or the million users that you intend to have your product reach, right? At the same time, if you just focus on marketing, but you've not really taken care of the product part of it, then you are like basically selling snake oil. So, which is like not the right thing to do, and the company will fail. It is going to happen. So the right mix is to ensure that you're taking care of both aspects. End of the day, be guided by the fact that you're trying to help someone in terms of creating value for them, and whatever you're offering or whatever product is going out there, it is going to make someone's life easier. If that aspect is taken care of, like if you think about how Jeff Bezos has this obsession in terms of just making things better for his customer. That kind of obsession helps clear out a lot of things. So you have to ensure that whatever you're building, you don't have leaks here and there, and you're able to take a look at this. And again, like I said, don't be too worried that everything is going to be perfect the first time, but ensure that whatever, when you're thinking of, okay, this thing can go wrong, this thing can go wrong, so you're thinking in totality and putting something good out there. So that would help. And then the other things boils down to your business, specifically what you're trying to achieve, what the product is, and other things.
Next question is on the idea of work experience. So I have worked in the industry for a good 10 years before I started my entrepreneurial journey. But I see a lot of young people, I mean, 19-year-olds who are getting into this. I know it's tough, it's challenging. Do you feel having work experience under your belt makes a difference when it comes to starting a startup, getting into entrepreneurship?
So everything over here boils down to quality rather than quantity, right? Um, if you've been in an established setup, but you worked on the hard things and you worked across the levels of the company, and if a situation arises where you can just fold up your sleeves and go to any level, it's not like you're just making the decision making, but you can, on the execution part of it, you can just plug in and take care of things if things are going wrong. Then your education or whatever time you spent in that firm is well spent. It all boils down to how well you've utilized the time over there. In terms of my personal advice, I mean, if I were to advise a younger myself, I would say spend more time in smaller workspaces uh, and startups versus established ones. Simply because because the number of people are less. If you're any good at what you do, you will be given the opportunity to take on more responsibility at an earlier stage in time. If you go to an established company, they'll probably wait 8 years to even, invite you to, come to one certain level, and it's just a title, to be fair and honest, right? And so as long as people are happy working at the firms, that's great. But for for me, when I look at things, it's all about what did you learn about yourself when you were working. So can you, were you good enough to, work across the levels? It's not just the decision making part of it, but execution. Can you be plugged into any of the levels if things are going wrong, and you can take care of that? And being in a smaller setup, being in a startup definitely helps, because at a very short time, what the opportunities that you get, probably say 3 years, 4 years, it gets cut down to 6 or 8 months if you are able to prove yourself in a startup. So that's something which definitely works. And I really believe it's not to do with age. It's more about how hard are you willing to just outgrow the person to fit into that role. Can you really grow into that role? Because no one comes right away fit to be in a certain. You have to go into those shoes.
Month, I have a follow up on this question, which also takes me to the next question. Uh, I working in an organized large company, it's difficult for you to jump up the ranks quickly because there are just too many hierarchies, and you are expected to do a very small thing in a very large cocoon, balloon. So, do you think it makes sense for people who want to get into the entrepreneur journey to start working in smaller spaces and maybe in a startup? What do you think about it?
So either way, an entrepreneur will figure out restlessness inside, right? So I remember, when I was working at a extremely large company, you don't want to be just another number in the crowd, right? So that restlessness will always be inside. So even if you put an entrepreneur or someone who's not really happy with the status quo in a setup, which might not necessarily create the best entrepreneurs, they will kind of somehow differentiate themselves. Uh, and definitely, they don't have a lot of patience. So if they see that it's going to take a lot of time to get somewhere where they really want to be, and they feel they're capable and they're working towards it, people are not going to stick along unless you give them something really challenging and you reward them accordingly. So smaller setups is what I would prefer. But again, you cannot. It's a nature versus nurture thing. I don't know if we can still create entrepreneurs or whether it's inbuilt, what we call the kira, right? In terms of that obsession, in terms of you want to be more than just what's offered to you on the plate when you're somewhere. Right? I mean, like, if you come into the world and people tell you that, okay, you're only going to do this, or this is what you're good at, or this is, probably this is the best opportunity you get in your life, and you're never going to get another opportunity. And what is that obsession inside you, which tells you that, okay, probably I'm not happy to settle. So it totally depends. But yes, if you find that, you got that restlessness inside, you're not happy really there, the best thing is to just keep working. I mean, like, if it's a side hustle, start a side hustle till you get comfortable. If it's a startup, it's a startup. Startup is definitely good because, like I said, if you work with A team attracts A team, and B team attracts C team players, right? So if you're working with some really incredible, startups and leaders, your thinking also starts going totally different. So probably, I mean, like when you're starting out, you're probably thinking of building a great company in Delhi, and then you're shifting things to, okay, how can I make it amongst the good ones in India? And then, I mean, like, all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, how can I have a global impact, right? So just in the case of okay, I think that we'll be covering IPL sometime ahead, but working with the right kind of guys in a very proximity, and you're working with them, and you're like really challenging each other, and that's a different high altogether.
Once I wanted to move ahead and ask you a question because you've worked in organization design. Building a company requires you to attract talent towards you. Very difficult at an early stage because you cannot offer them the emoluments that a large company can offer. So you need to give them something else, an experience which attracts them. So the question essentially is on building a culture of empathy. And this question comes from my discussion with another fellow entrepreneur in the incubator here, who was recently selected as a fellow in Ashoka Foundation. So Ashoka people, they had a small workshop in Bangalore just last week, where they called in these 2B fellows, and they did a empathy generating practices. Like, do you think building a culture of empathy helps you attract talent?
The culture of empathy is, what do you exactly mean? The culture of
I mean, where you step into the shoes of people you're bringing in. Because as an entrepreneur, we have high expectations of ourselves. But people who are coming in and joining you for whatever role may not have that drive. So you need to understand their perspective and where they're coming from, and really, pipe yourself down every now and then to match up, and then slowly, motivate them towards your own goals. So how do you does empathizing with your employees, your interns, help there? What is the role of empathy in an organization, especially in a startup?
Okay, so the answer is multifold, right? It totally depends on what level of the company you are. So supposedly if you're just starting the company and you're getting the co-founders and the initial people who will hold some ownership in the company. At that point in time, it always pays to have a very clear and honest discussion in terms of what we're expecting to achieve out of it. Right? Everyone would be taking some risk. Everyone would be bringing in something of value to the company, and that's why they're coming in, right? Having a diverse skill set definitely helps, right? So obviously, when you think of a diverse skill set, it would become a bit difficult to figure out why some things are not working as fast, because you might be taking care of the technical side, someone is taking care of the marketing side, third person taking care of people, and probably it's not really sinking in well. And to build that empathy, you just need to have the kind of trust where that the other person is trying to do the best they can at that point in time. Having said that, when you build a culture, two things are difficult to ignore, and especially as you start scaling up, you cannot accept and encourage toxic behavior when someone is a bully, and even if they could be the best of performers, but they're demotivating others, it sends the wrong message to the rest of the team, right? And at the same time, when you think about non-performance, it could probably be because they're out of their comfort area initially. But if you give them time, or even if you give them the comfort of switching to other things, and they're still not able to really measure up, then you have to learn to let go and make it easy for them and do it in a very nice way. But these are hard decisions which have to be taken, and all in for, I mean, like building a great company, great experience, ensuring that you're there for the team, especially because the team is what helps you build the company and make things happen. But two things, I mean, like, I personally draw a line. If there's toxic behavior happening and someone is bullying, or I mean, like, someone is not really helping others, but just basically making them miserable, that needs to be addressed. And second, non-performance, you need to give them the chances where they can probably flourish in other roles. But if things are not really working, probably they're not the right fit for the company. And everyone has a gift. It's not that the company that you're building is the gold standard for everything. They're probably meant to be somewhere else, and you just have to respect that and respect the others in the team too.
I want to move ahead in this conversation and now ask about innovation. Um, Building a company, especially a startup, is all about innovating from an existing model, which could probably be failing, or or introducing a whole different category in the market. Do you feel, and that's just my general observation. If I look at the Indian startup ecosystem in the last 10 years, we began first aping the West. The companies which are now some of the largest unicorn startups in this region are all ripoffs from an established American company. So, do you think the journey to innovation always starts from that point where you first look at something, either from this point you move, or there is a smaller, you climb the ladder?
As and when you go to a separate market, you do need to innovate for the masses there, because not all customers are alike, not all customers behave accordingly, and even if you look at the any of the ventures or firms which have probably taken inspiration from the US or China counterparts, it still is a challenge to survive in the market. You'll always find that there'll be always at max three companies will be really out there in terms of branding and brand presence, right? The others, there are three ways out there, right? One is obviously they're going to get acquired. Second, they're going to stay in the market, and third, they're going to die. So just surviving in a market like India itself is a huge challenge, and I can be pretty well assured that they would have taken their share of innovations internally, which might not be visible, to just stay relevant and be there in the market. Even to get acquired, like 95% of the ventures will fail, and India would need some of those innovations over here. Having said that, you're perfectly right when you talk about the 0 to 1 innovation, which is there, and that can again only come from a culture where I'm not saying celebrating failure, but you should be tolerant of making mistakes and be okay with it that some of the things are going to fail. For example, I'll again take the case of Amazon. I mean, like Amazon, it just keeps relentlessly working on things, and it's okay with a subset of it failing because a subset will take off. So something like a Fire phone will not really work, and there will be some money, effort, and energy lost. But something like an AWS, when the rest of the world is laughing at you, Amazon Web Services will take off and it'll lead to something greater than a 15+% revenue share for Amazon. Right? So you have to again be guided by what you really want to see in the world out there, and be comfortable with the idea that you could have the best things in mind for the market, for the customers, but sometimes your idea has not really come. Sometimes the money runs out. You have to be comfortable with the idea that some of the things are going to fail, and I think that again builds back to the concept of building that mindset in people, where people really go out and experiment. I mean, like if you just look at the kind of experimentation which happens, you don't see a kid trying to build something and just give up and say, okay, I'm never going to do this again. Right? We just have to keep that alive, and encouraging in business is more difficult because obviously you're trying to survive as a venture. So it's a healthy mix where you ensure that whoever is trusting their money and trust with you, so the customers who are giving you their money, right? You ensure that you do well by them, you do well by your shareholders, but at the same time you're still trying to get the edge in terms of what will set you apart in the market, where you're okay with some failure to happen. But if you don't take those risks, someone else will.
Not, I kind of agree and resonate with that idea. and which brings me to the next question, and something that has troubled me for a long, long time, which is, can we ever really create a truly global startup coming from India? Because we have amazing technology talent. I mean, Google headquarters is full of Indian techies. But when it comes to, and we have created ourselves a powerful IT services business. But when it comes to creating consumer-facing tech companies, Indian techies have simply failed. So why do you think this has happened? Why does the brain drain simply doesn't stop? People are just trying to run away. I mean, if America today opens their visa norms, which they are trying to curb, people will literally swim in dozens from here. So, what is lacking in the ecosystem right now that is driving them away from the country, and they're not willing to contribute, not willing to create, not willing to innovate? What's the problem there? What do you think?
So I do believe that we've had some success in terms of some of the companies going global, right? So if you look at something like Zoho, that's something from India. If you look at Freshworks, Zomato, Paytm, Shiro's, these are a couple of companies which have made, but we really are still to be out there in terms of the numbers. If you look at the kind of numbers which come in from the different places, again it goes back to what do we tell the kids when we look at the Indian institutions? They just told me like get good grades and probably get a job somewhere and stuff. So it's never in the arena of their thinking that they could probably set up a business, or they could start something, or they could build something which would be of value. It's more about, okay, even if they were to build something, they build it at another company. So just encouraging them, right? And talent, in terms of the kind of talent that we have the most incredible talent. I mean, like I had the good fortune of watching Super 30 recently, and we all aware. I mean, like if you look at some of the biggest companies in the world, quite a few of them are headed by Indian nationals. Uh, so having said that, I would say that we would definitely need to work upon a couple of things. Regulation is definitely one part of it. Are facing issues with regulation. I mean, like still a lot of companies which intend to go really big, they would still look at something like Singapore for setting up their businesses, right? Why is that? And so can some part of it be addressed? Uh, Second, in terms of just creating the talent pool, like I said, if you look at the scenario for IPL, how Indian cricket was before, pre-IPL and post-IPL, the kind of difference which has come in, the kind of talent pool that we have created, just by the virtue of youngsters who are like 16, 17, 18 years old, playing alongside some of the world's greats. It once your thinking has really expanded, one can't go back to mediocrity, one can't go back to thinking small. um, so we need to set up those kind of systems where we can encourage people from good talent pool to come to India, probably work alongside, work on good things, and I'm just hoping that things will happen, because I know that the talent is here. uh, People are hungry, and we just need to, I mean, like work on a couple of things, and hopefully we will. And I would also look at people of Indian origin who have done well in Silicon Valley. If they could uh, somehow just open up whatever little knowledge that they have. I mean, like I am aware that we have VC funds, we have angel investors who are helping out a lot of kids who go from India to Silicon Valley, or probably other bases. But just having something up in India would also really help the kids, and really help the next generation. Make things happen. It's all about the space between your ears, and how you're thinking and how you're approaching things. And we guys are a stubborn lot. We just need to, I mean, like get thinking along the sides of really working on those things.
Do you feel we can be where China is today? Do you feel we can create those large tech companies, the likes of Alibaba, the likes of Tencent, which is taking the world by storm? I mean, Ant Financial today is now one of the world's largest financial services companies, which was barely $30 billion in revenues just 5 years ago, and now almost $150 billion. Paytm is nowhere close. Though Vijay Shekhar Sharma has done a great job at it. So Is it because the ecosystem is not supportive, or Indians are adamant when it comes to adoption of technology? Because that's not the case. I mean, mobile phones are galore. People are, they're adopting TikTok like crazy. So technology adoption definitely exists. So what lacks? What really lacks? I mean, I'm just not able to figure it out. Why, despite this, are we not able to do it?
So I'll be extremely honest. I don't claim to have all the answers, but having said that, mentioned Paytm. I mean, like I really love the hustle that Vijay brings to the table. At the same time, I'm aware that someone like Jack Ma and Masayoshi Son on the boards of a company like Paytm. So it's again all about working with world class. So I know for sure that if tomorrow I have to look at some of the Indian companies which might do really well, and I look at China, what's happened in terms of the kind of proliferation that has happened, the kind of digital ease that the customers have become used to. In terms of, obviously, there are some trade-offs in privacy in terms of facial recognition and AI and other things which are happening in China. But if you look at the things which have happened over there in terms of the people crossing the digital divide, right? In terms of becoming comfortable doing transactions online, starting off with we did pay with cash. I mean, like what do you call the COD, cash on delivery is what we started off with. Now we are getting more comfortable with credit cards. Now we are getting more comfortable with paid something like a Paytm or digital wallet. Uh, so I would definitely have some hope in terms of companies again building that kind of collaboration where you're working with some of the greats and you're not just thinking in terms of a nation, but you're just trying to figure out how can you best serve the world. Because if you look at some of the tech which is coming up in the next decade, a lot of the things will be render a lot of the nations and totally useless in terms of some of the things which can happen over there, and it will be global collaboration which will really help the masses going forward.
All of this, it brings about its own set of challenges and a toll on you. So, how do you think young entrepreneurs, can manage it?
So an entrepreneur is basically a CXO where the X component keeps changing, right? And an entrepreneur has to become comfortable with taking on more and more roles than what would be otherwise defined on a card. The card means nothing. I mean, like you started the company, you want the company to do well. You are doing whatever it takes to take your company to the next level, right? And for that, it basically means execution. So if you're a genuine hustler, genuine entrepreneur, you're not shy, you're not afraid to do whatever it takes ethically, right? And in terms of execution, you're not afraid to. So supposedly, I mean, like if the logistics doesn't turn up and something has to be delivered, you will take out your own car, you will go and deliver those things, and you will take care of it. You will not say that I probably have so and so title and I will not do those things. So that's how an entrepreneur would be. Uh, you pull out all stops. You don't let titles or self-made definitions stop you. You do what is required, and you go out and do those things. As an entrepreneur, you have to make peace with the fact that you are on a journey which is totally different. But as long as you're okay, sorted here and here, you will find the strength to cope with it internally. How others react is something which is outside your control. But how you react to others reacting is something which can be made better if you personally are convinced as to why you are doing it. So if you have a vision that okay, this is the one life that I've been given, and this is what I want to be, and this is what I'm going to pursue, and I'm not going to settle for something of, I'm not going to settle for a lesser me, right? Right? And you're comfortable, you'll find some strength over there. Having said that, it is going to take a lot of emotional toll. You will find things like depression, and sometimes you're like just out. When you're growing up, you don't really take things too seriously when others might say something to you, right? But gradually, at some point in time, there might be a scene, a scenario where you just have to grow to the level where you're able to, I mean, like just take what's coming at you and just let it peacefully rest. And you're just supposed to do something, and you're just going about doing it. And some of the things which really help, if you want to really focus on some of the things, being healthy matters a bit, because I mean, like, if you can take care of your body will take care of you. Something like meditation or having control over your breath helps. Uh, One more thing which helps is, I mean, like, if you have hobbies outside your workspace, so if you have something like, marathons or some challenges outside, even if something at work doesn't really go well, but you're taking care of this, so you still feel a sense of stability. But if work is your only focus, then you feel that okay, everything is going down, right? And just ensure that So when I say that you're growing into the person you're meant to be, it's not just that okay, you're growing knowledge-wise, you're growing in terms of the work and everything. You're growing wherever there will be pain. Sometimes growth happens when you're not even expecting it, right?
Right.
You're not even thinking that okay, this is something I had to go through, but you will be forced to learn those things, and you'll be better off because of it. And that's something you've chosen, because you've chosen this life, and as long as you've made peace with it, you cannot control the rest of the world, but you can control the reaction which come from them.
Great points. I think we just got many points which entrepreneurs struggle with, that they have to deal with on a daily basis, that I deal with on a daily basis. So once I would very like to thank you for being here today and answering all these questions. I think this is very important for young early stage founders to really understand what it takes, and I think many of your answers will give them a guideline of sorts of how they can approach entrepreneurship. So I'd like to thank you for being featured on the show.
Thank you, Rohit, for having me here. I just got a small gift for you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here.
I really appreciate you taking the time out. I really enjoyed the show.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and spread love. Thank you.